On a family vacation, my parents told me to get out of the car after I refused to help pay for my sister's medical bills. My mom said, "You'll have to find a way back on your own." I grinned and said, "I already have a plan." Their faces dropped when. So let me set the stage. I'm 28 years old, a 28-year-old guy named Matt. My parents are in their late 50s. My dad is 58, and my mom is 56. They've always been the kind of parents who believe that they did their part, and now it's time for me to pay them back. My sister Emma, 24, is the golden child. She could do no wrong in their eyes. I've always been the odd one out, partly because I don't have the same ambitions or lifestyle they want for me, and partly because Emma has always been their shining star. It's always been this way. Emma got the good grades, followed the proper path, and is now on her way to being a successful businesswoman, even though a lot of her success comes from their help. I, on the other hand, didn't go straight to college after high school. I worked odd jobs, spent a few years traveling, and eventually settled down in a city I loved. I don't have the flashy lifestyle my parents hoped for, but I'm happy. Or at least I was until this trip. My parents decided that we were going to go on this family bonding vacation to a cabin in the mountains, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The plan was for a peaceful weekend away to reconnect as a family. Well, that's what they said. But as soon as we piled into the car and started driving, I realized this trip wasn't about family bonding at all. It was a chance for my parents to guilt trip me into doing something I didn't want to do. The drive started off normal enough. Emma was sitting in the back seat, scrolling through her phone while my parents were making small talk about the weather in the cabin. I was trying to enjoy the scenic route, but I could already feel the tension building up. It had been a long few weeks, and I knew they were going to bring up the same thing they always did when it came to family matters: money. We just passed a small town when Emma casually mentioned something about needing money for another round of medical bills. Her health problems were something she talked about a lot. She had a few ongoing issues, but nothing that I felt warranted the constant barrage of emergency requests for financial help. She was always fine, but somehow she managed to convince my parents that her health was in jeopardy and that they needed to pay for these treatments. I hadn't contributed to any of her bills, not because I didn't care about her well-being, but because I couldn't afford it. I had my own financial struggles, student loans, rent, some medical expenses of my own that had come up. But every time Emma would get sick or need something, my parents would turn to me, expecting me to step up and help like I was some sort of backup bank. I had told them no again and again, but they didn't seem to care. This time, Emma's request for money was different. She didn't even ask me directly. She just mentioned it like it was a given that I would help. My mom, who had been silent up until that point, turned around in her seat and said, "Matt, you know Emma's been through a lot. You've helped before. We really need you to pitch in this time." I could feel my stomach tighten. "I don't have the money, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Emma chimed in from the back seat, her tone annoyingly casual. "It's just a couple thousand. It's not that big of a deal, Matt. You've got the money. Just give some help out." I turned to look at my parents, my dad's eyes focused on the road, but I could see his jaw clenched in that way that meant he was already annoyed. "Matt, this is family. You should want to help," my dad said, his voice tight. "We've supported you through a lot of things, and this is your chance to do the same." I felt a rush of frustration flood my chest. I had always been the one who was expected to drop everything for them, expected to sacrifice my own goals, my own stability, to make sure Emma got everything she needed. I didn't even know if I could afford it, but they always acted like I should just take out a loan or pull the money out of thin air. "I can't just keep giving you money," I said. "I'm not rolling in it, you know?" There was a long silence. Emma was silent for once, but I could feel the tension radiating from the front seats. My mom's voice broke the quiet, and it was colder than I expected. "So what? You're just going to turn your back on your family? You're that selfish." I felt the blood rush to my face, but I didn't let my anger show. I'm not turning my back, Mom. I just don't have the funds to do it. I have my own stuff to deal with. My dad's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He was getting agitated, and I could tell this conversation was about to go downhill fast. You're being unreasonable, he said. We've been more than supportive of you, Matt. And this is how you repay us? By refusing to help your sister when she's in need. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? My mind was racing. I wanted to argue more, but I knew where this was going. It always went this way when money was involved. My parents were always quick to pull the "we've done so much for you" card. I was tired of it. Then, after a long pause, my mom dropped the bombshell. If you're not going to help, maybe you should just get out of the car. We don't need your negativity ruining this trip. I blinked, my mind racing. Wait, what? She didn't even look at me when she said it. You heard me. If you're not going to support your sister, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this family vacation. You'll have to find your way home on your own. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't decide if I was more shocked or furious. I looked at my dad for support, but he didn't say anything. He just kept driving, like this was some normal conversation. Are you serious? I asked, my voice wavering a little. Don't make us repeat ourselves, Matt, my dad said, his voice tight. You can get out. I could feel my fists clenching. The car felt too small, too suffocating. It was happening again. This was the same thing they did every time they didn't get their way. They made me feel like I was the one who was being unreasonable, like I was the problem. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. I didn't want to let them see how badly their words were affecting me. So I took a deep breath, turned to look out the window, and just sat there in silence. A few moments passed, the tension growing thicker with every second. Then I said something I hadn't planned on saying. I'm not getting out of the car. My mom's voice was icy. Oh, you're not? Well, maybe we should just leave you somewhere then. See how far your independence gets you. And that's when I said the one thing that completely caught them off guard. I already have a plan. Matt, what do you mean you have a plan? She asked, her tone softer now, but still annoyed. You're not just going to sit here and pretend like everything's fine. You need to help your sister. I don't have the money, I repeated. It wasn't that I didn't want to help Emma, but I had my own bills to pay. I've been scraping by for months, trying to save for a vacation myself, for once, to get away from all the guilt trips they'd been throwing my way. You're being ridiculous, she said. She's your sister. You've always helped before. My sister, Emma, had been in and out of the hospital for the last few months. She had chronic health issues, and I'd help with a couple of her medical bills, but they were starting to pile up. And every time she needed something, my parents would expect me to contribute, even though I was barely making ends meet myself. I didn't have the luxury of just throwing money at things. I can't keep doing this, I said quietly, more to myself than to them. My mom gave me a long, hard look, like she was trying to figure out if I was serious or if I was just being difficult. I understand that things are tough for you, Matt, but Emma's been through so much. You should want to help her. I was tired of this conversation. I've been down this road too many times, and every time it felt like I was expected to sacrifice everything for Emma's sake. But I wasn't in the position to keep doing that. I just can't, I said, shaking my head. I don't have the money. There was a long pause. My dad didn't say anything, but I could feel his disappointment radiating through the car. It was like he was silently trying to make me feel guilty for not helping. I hated that feeling, like I was being cornered into making a decision I wasn't ready for. Finally, my mom sighed. If you're not going to help, then maybe you should just get out. We can't keep dealing with this. You're just making everything harder. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought she'd go this far. What do you mean, get out? You're not contributing, Matt. If you're going to be this difficult, maybe it's best if you just find your own way home. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I didn't want to make a scene. I knew that if I did, it would just escalate things. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how unfair this whole situation was. I looked at my dad, hoping he would back me up, but he just stared ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I'm not getting out of the car," I said firmly. "I'm not going to let you do this to me." Mom was quiet for a moment, but then she spoke again, her voice cold. "Fine, but don't expect any help from us anymore. You can figure it out yourself." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I didn't know how things had gotten so bad between us. It wasn't like I wanted to be the bad guy. I just couldn't keep giving when I didn't have anything to give. I sat back in my seat, looking out the window. The car was silent again. My mom was fuming, and my dad was just there, not saying anything. I could tell they were disappointed in me, but it wasn't like I was asking for much. I just wanted some space to live my own life without constantly being guilt into doing things for everyone else. We drove for a while in tense silence. The drive to the cabin was long, and I knew there was no way I could back out now. I just had to get through the trip, even though it felt like everything between us was hanging by a thread. We finally pulled into the parking lot of the cabin, and I could feel my stomach tighten. This was supposed to be a family trip, a time for us to reconnect. But instead, it felt like an endless cycle of guilt and resentment. I grabbed my bag from the back seat, not looking at my parents. I didn't know what to say. It didn't feel like anything was going to be resolved here. My mom stepped out of the car and turned to face me, her expression hard. "Matt," she said, her voice quieter now. "This isn't how things are supposed to be." "I know," I said, "but this is how it is." And with that, I walked inside the cabin, feeling like I was stepping into some sort of strange battlefield. The tension between us wasn't gone. In fact, it felt like it had only grown stronger, like something was hanging in the air, waiting to break. And I had a feeling the worst was yet to come. I walked into the cabin, trying to focus on the familiar surroundings. The cozy, log cabin walls, the rustic furniture, the soft, flickering light from the fireplace. It all felt like a distant memory now. What was supposed to be a break from all the tension felt like the start of something much worse. I set my bag down near the door and looked around, unsure of what to do. It felt like a strange version of my family's vacation spot. My mom was already inside, unpacking things in the kitchen, and my dad had gone straight to the living room to sit in his usual spot by the TV. I was left standing there, trying to make sense of everything. My chest tightened as I thought about how everything had spiraled. I didn't want to be a disappointment. I didn't want to be the one who wasn't there for Emma, but I also didn't want to be the one who constantly sacrificed everything just to keep my family happy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw a message from Chris. It was simple, just a "Hey, you good?" with a thumbs up emoji. I hadn't responded to his last couple of texts, but I knew that he was just checking in. I thought about everything that had led up to this moment. The way my parents had handled Emma's illness, the way they expected me to shoulder so much, the way they never really saw me. And I couldn't help but feel a sense of resentment. I texted back quickly. Yeah, just need a minute to breathe. It wasn't long before my mom called me from the kitchen, her voice just a little too bright. "Matt, can you come help me with these bags? I need to get everything set up." I hesitated. She was still trying to control things, like she didn't see how bad things had gotten. I didn't want to argue, not yet, but I also didn't want to keep pretending things were fine. I sighed, putting my phone down and heading toward the kitchen. When I entered, my mom was already pulling out the pots and pans, her back turned to me. "Matt," she said without turning around, "you've always been the reliable one. I don't know what's going on with you lately, but this isn't you. I don't know why you're shutting us out like this." Her words stung. I didn't know what to say, so I just stayed quiet, grabbing a couple of bags to help with the setup. "I'm sorry, okay?" she said, her voice softening. "I know you don't want to feel like you're being forced into things, but we need you. Emma needs you." I wanted to say something back, something about how they needed to stop treating me like I owed them everything. But I bit my tongue. There was no point in making it worse. Instead, I just nodded. Let's just get through this weekend, I said, my voice calm, and then we can figure things out. She looked at me, as if she were weighing her next words carefully. Finally, she sighed. I just want things to be better, Matt. I don't want to keep fighting. You're part of this family. I know, I said quietly. I'm just tired. She didn't say anything else, just gave me a small, sympathetic smile before turning back to the sink. I went to my room, closing the door behind me. I didn't want to get sucked back into that conversation. I just wanted a moment to breathe, to think. The hours passed slowly, with everyone trying to pretend like nothing had happened. The evening was spent in awkward silence at the dinner table. We all ate, but no one seemed to know what to say. It was like we were all walking on eggshells around each other, afraid to say something that would make things worse. That night, I laid in bed, my mind racing. I couldn't keep doing this, pretending everything was okay. I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to keep giving everything I had to a family that didn't see me. It was then that I got another text, this time from my dad. Asterisk, Matt, I know this trip has been tough, but we need to talk. Asterisk, I looked at the message for a moment, unsure of what to do. I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to fix things, to smooth over everything so that we could go back to the way things were. But I wasn't sure I could do that anymore. I put my phone down and closed my eyes, my mind still tangled with everything that had happened. The next morning, when I came out to join them for breakfast, the tension was still there. My dad barely looked at me, and my mom kept glancing at me like she was waiting for me to say something. But I wasn't ready to open up. Not yet. I sat at the table, eating my breakfast slowly, trying to make sense of everything. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. As the day went on, the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense but manageable. We didn't talk about the argument from yesterday, but we were all still walking around with this invisible weight hanging between us. My mom and dad tried to be normal, but it felt like they were forcing it. It was exhausting. That afternoon, I finally decided I couldn't stay in this limbo anymore. I had been avoiding the conversation all weekend, but it was clear I needed to address things head on. I wasn't going to fix everything right there and then, but I couldn't keep pretending like I was okay with how things had been going. After lunch, when my mom was sitting outside on the porch, I sat down next to her. I figured it was time to have an honest conversation, one that didn't involve guilt or blame. Mom, I said, trying to keep my tone calm, I think we need to talk. She looked up, her face softening when she saw my serious expression. About what, Matt? I took a deep breath. About everything. About the way you and Dad have been treating me. About Emma and the pressure you put on me. She was quiet for a moment, looking at me like she wasn't sure where I was going with this. I don't understand, she said slowly. You're our son. We want to help you help your sister. It's not about pressure, it's just about family. I shook my head. I know you want to help Emma, but I've been struggling too. I'm trying to keep my head above water, and it's hard when I'm expected to sacrifice everything all the time. I can't keep giving when I don't have anything left to give. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of guilt and understanding, but she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand on mine, her voice quieter now. I didn't realize you felt that way. I couldn't help but let out a small sigh of relief. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but at least she was hearing me. I don't want to be the bad guy, I continued. I want to help Emma, but I can't be the only one who does. It's not fair to put all of that on me. She nodded slowly, looking like she was processing everything I had said. You're right, she said softly. We've been relying on you too much. I'm sorry. The sincerity in her voice took me by surprise. I had expected more resistance, but it seemed like she understood now. She didn't fight back or try to justify everything. Instead, she just accepted that things needed to change. I don't know what to do next, she added, but I want to fix this. I don't want you to feel like you're being forced into a corner. Neither do I. I said, finally feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I just need space to figure things out without all the pressure. We sat there for a few more moments in silence, but it wasn't awkward this time. It felt like we were on the same page for the first time in a long while. The next couple of days weren't perfect, but they were a step in the right direction. We talked more openly, and there was no more guilt tripping. My dad apologized too, admitting that he had been too focused on Emma's medical bills and hadn't realized how much pressure he had been putting on me. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but it was a start. By the time we left the cabin, things were calmer. I still had to work out how to balance my own life with my family's needs. But at least now, I knew I could set boundaries without feeling like the villain. So, Reddit, here's the question. Am I the asshole for refusing to help pay for my sister's medical bills? I know she's been through a lot, but it just felt like my parents were taking advantage of me, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being to make up for their financial decisions. I get that family is supposed to help each other, but I also feel like I have a right to say no sometimes. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, make sure to like and subscribe for more family drama and revenge-filled tales. Don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts.